A great many black people are vastly exaggerating the extent to which racism touches their lives. And I know what happened to George Floyd. I know what happened to all of these people. And frankly, folks, I can take those statistics back to the 90s. I pay very close attention. However, the idea that to be a black person, including a black man, is to walk out into the streets and be ever at risk of being either abused by a cop or treated in a starkly inferior way by a white person is a lie. And I'm sorry to say that, but I think that an awful lot of black people today are taught to pretend that that's the case out of a sense of allegiance with our race, out of a sense that white people need to be taught a lesson. And I get it. I can put myself in their heads. I try very hard to. But frankly, many people are thinking, what about what happened to George Floyd? And as I've said in the pages of Quillette, the idea that George Floyd died because he was black isn't true. The facts don't support it. It looks like it. And if you had asked me even as recently as 4 years ago, I would have said that must be it. And I argued that with my sparring partner, Glenn Lowry. He and I disagreed about the cops. We're thought of as these apostates. But I always said with the cops, Glenn, there's no disagreement. But it's not true. For any death that you see like that the cops inflict on someone, and there is a problem with the cops, but I hate to say, it's not as racialized as people say. You have to remember that that same thing almost undoubtedly happened to a white person, often not long before, and we never heard about it. And so, what happened to George Floyd was absolutely egregious, but it had happened to Tony Timpa just 4 years before. And the common answer that black people are killed disproportionately to our numbers, even that doesn't work. Because really what it comes down to is one, and I don't like talking about this because it's so unpleasant, it's about how much crime people commit. And unfortunately, for reasons I think we can all understand, black men in particular commit a disproportionate amount of crime. That can't be denied. Or two, getting into problems with cops is also predicated on socioeconomics. More black people are poor disproportionately, and that is a grievous error in our society in itself. But if you're poor, then you're more likely to have warrants, you're more likely to be armed, you're more likely to do all sorts of things through no fault of your own often. But that means that you're more likely to encounter the cops. Well, more black people are poor. So what all this means is that the definition of the black experience in the United States is not that for no reason whatsoever you go out into the streets and because white people don't like black people, a cop might push you up against a wall and the cop might kill you. It's simply not true. And it's interesting. My friend John Wood, who is becoming somebody who's on the list of black apostates lately, he knows his stuff. He grew up as a black person in a disadvantaged black community. He's not some buttoned up conservative elderly person. He's the shit. And he said that in his efforts to try to get the word out in the black community that we need to think about something other than the occasional idiot cop who does something really bad, is that he says he talks to black people who are very upset about the cops and he says, okay, so who do you know who got killed? And he can barely think of a time when anybody he spoke to, and he's spoken to a lot of people, said, well, I know somebody. Now, they all know somebody who was unfairly treated by a cop. The statistics show that the cops are a little meaner to black people, and that's grievous in itself. But do they kill more black people? They just don't. When you factor in criminal records, criminal behavior, and especially socioeconomics, it's just that the cops kill out of racism isn't there. So we're told that you can't know the black experience, with the idea being that someone like me walks out into the streets and I have to goad myself against racist treatment. People exaggerate vastly. When you see on social media a middle class, especially black person who says, I encounter racism every day. Frankly, no, they don't. They're exaggerating. Do you encounter nasty treatment by the cops on a regular basis? It depends on your neighborhood. Do the cops kill you because you're black? Frankly, no. Are the cops mean to you? That is something that we need to really, really work on. Is that the experience of most black Americans in the United States? Once again, no evidence suggests that it does. And so, if white people bristle at that idea that if you are white, you can't say anything about race because you haven't had the experience. As if black people now are Jews in Weimar Germany. It's a vast exaggeration. Nobody is consciously trying to manipulate. There's a very complex dynamic going on in the black community where we're encouraged to have a certain sense of cultural fellowship. We are encouraged to not forget the people who we left behind. All of this is perfectly understandable, but unfortunately, a byproduct of it is that we are taught to exaggerate. It doesn't mean racism doesn't exist. I could give you some stories, but I'm going to stop here. But no, our experience is not what we're being told, and that includes with the cops and murder. And frankly, that untruth is at the heart of why the race discussion in the United States right now is at the impasse that it is.